You know that phrase, working in peace? Yeah, it only applies if your job isn't surrounded by tombstones, cold winds, and things that shouldn't be moving on their own. Tonight, you're about to hear one of those stories, the kind that makes you want to leave the hallway light on for a few days. And the creepiest part? It all happened to a guy who just wanted to pay the bills pulling some overtime as a night guard in a cemetery at night. Because, of course, nothing bad ever happens in a
cemetery at 3 in the morning, right? But before we dive into this unsettling account, a quick reminder. If you've ever experienced something weird, creepy, or just plain bizarre at your job, send it to us. Here, your trauma becomes content. And hey, it's cheaper than therapy. Drop it in the comments. Who knows? Maybe your story will be our next script. Oh, and if you're listening to this at work, now might be a good time to glance over your shoulder, just to be safe. My name's Raphael. I'm 32 years old, and this story starts during one of those months where everything seems to go wrong. I got fired from the security company I'd worked at for 2 years. Contract ended, empty promises, and of course, they didn't pay me for the last 2 weeks. Typical. With rent overdue and only $47 in my account, I started hunting for any kind of temp job. That's when a buddy, Giba, messaged me. I've got a gig, just for a few days. Night shift guard, quiet spot, cash pay. When I asked where, he just replied, Alto de Serra Cemetery. But don't worry, it's small. Just patrol and sleep there. Easy. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But then he sent the location, the groundskeeper's number, and added, It's urgent. The regular guard vanished. I mean, left for personal reasons. Real urgent. Even with that sketchy vanished part, desperation spoke louder. I called the number and talked to an older man named Edson. He sounded tense, told me I could start that very night. Said to arrive before 6, bring a flashlight, food, and warm clothes. When I asked why the last guy left so suddenly, he just said, health issues. Mental, maybe. But don't worry. Just watch the guardhouse and do a few rounds. Nothing major. Nothing major. If only I knew what was waiting for me on that hill. I arrived at the cemetery around 5:30 p.m. It was far, way farther than I expected. I rode up a dirt road that felt like an off-road trail. Potholes, steep climbs, overgrown branches, brushing the bike. The place was on a high hill overlooking the city below, but nothing about it was romantic. It was silent, cold, and the wind made the gate creak before I even stopped the motorcycle. The entrance had a rusted iron gate and a small brick guardhouse set against a stone wall. The cemetery was smaller than I imagined, but still, it had depth. The graves trailed down the hill, weaving between twisted trees and a few old mausoleums. The groundskeeper, Edson, greeted me quickly. Handed me a flashlight, the guardhouse key, and an old map of the place. Just a tip, if you hear noises, ignore them. Lots of animals around. Old wood creaks, wind whistles. You'll get used to it. I tried to joke. Any chance I'll run into a ghost or something? He didn't laugh, just looked at me dead serious and said, Don't mess with what you don't understand. Just do your job. And then he left. I was alone. Night fell fast, a total blackout, broken only by the dim flashlight beam and the occasional candle flickering on graves left by grieving families. The heat was weird, muggy, like the air didn't move inside the cemetery. Even with wind outside, among the graves it felt like time had stopped. I did my first patrol, walked slowly between tombstones, trying to get the lay of the land. The flashlight lit up crooked crosses, faded photos, and rusted metal plaques. I heard creaks. Normal. Probably branches or small animals. But then there was a sound that chilled me. A whisper, like someone saying something, my name. I froze, held my breath, heard it again. Low, drawn out. But I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I picked up the pace and headed back to the guardhouse. Cell reception was barely a thing up there. I played offline music to distract myself, But around 2 a.m., something shifted. I saw a figure near the gate, still, like it was staring in. I got up, grabbed the flashlight, and went to the door. The figure didn't move, but when I shined the light toward it, there was nothing there. I rushed back in, locked the door, and sat in silence until the sky started to brighten. The next day, I almost bailed, but the money was good, and it was just 2 more nights. So I went back, better prepared this time. New flashlight, strong coffee, pepper spray just in case. But from the start, that night felt off. It wasn't muggy. It was cold, sharp cold. On the first patrol, I noticed something new. A candle burning on one of the oldest graves. Wouldn't be
Strange. If I didn't clearly remember that candle being unlit the night before. I got closer. On the tombstone lid, someone, or something, had scratched a symbol. A circle with crooked lines like claws or roots. I didn't touch it, just observed. Came back an hour later and the candle was still burning. And I hadn't lit anything. On the third round, the buzzing started. A pressure in my ears, like being underwater. And it got stronger whenever I passed near that grave. That time I heard
footsteps, slow, steady, down the trail behind the mausoleums. I followed the beam of my flashlight to the farthest corner. That's when I saw it. Something crouched. It looked human, but it wasn't. The arms were way too long, and its body trembled like it was ready to pounce. Its eyes glowed with their own reflection, like wet glass under candlelight. I froze, and then the thing saw me. It rose, slowly, and ran, but not toward me. It vanished between the graves with a speed no normal creature should have. I ran back to the watch house, locked everything, waited for dawn with the pepper spray in one hand and my heart pounding out of my chest. After the second night, I wasn't so sure it was just an animal anymore. I got home drenched in cold sweat, my clothes reeking of old wax and wet soil. Slept for maybe 3 hours and woke up with a sensation I can only describe as contamination. You know when it feels like something clung to your soul? Like you didn't just bring mud on your boots, but something invisible that now follows you into the corners of your home? I started digging. The cemetery's name, Alto da Serra, sounded way too generic, but I found an old forum with archived posts, stories about disappearances, people swearing they heard voices there, saw shapes at the tops of trees, and one post caught my eye. It was from 2009, signed by a guy named Paulo Z. I worked as a gravedigger at Alto da Serra for 6 months. I quit after seeing the same symbol carved into 5 different graves. Always the same pattern, a circle with claws. The candlelight never went out, and the local dogs would stop barking whenever they passed the front gate. I closed the browser. The symbol, the candles, it all matched. This wasn't a coincidence. I tried calling Edson, the caretaker. He didn't pick up. I sent a message. Nothing. I had 2 options left: disappear and never look back, or face one more night with my head on straight. I chose the second. Yeah, idiot, I know. But by that point, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about understanding what the hell was going on. I climbed the trail at sunset. The road was darker, like the trees had grown thicker somehow. I reached the gate and something was already wrong. The watch house door was ajar. I stopped, waited, grabbed the pepper spray and went in carefully. Everything seemed untouched. But on the floor, dirt, like footprints from someone crawling out of a grave. And the worst part? The candle. At the grave with the symbol, it was already lit. Before nightfall. Darkness dropped fast, like someone had pulled a thick curtain over the sky. The wind howled, but inside the cemetery, the air was still. Dead. Literally. On the first round, I saw shapes. It wasn't paranoia. The flashlight caught eyes that vanished a second later. Second round, I heard the whisper again, but this time, it was clearer. Not my name, a phrase. A single drawn-out word hard to decipher. Something like, Atzarel. I froze, repeated it in my head. It wasn't Portuguese, didn't sound like any language I knew, and yet it chilled me like I'd just heard a very old threat. I went back to the watch house, tried to text someone. Phone rebooted. Black screen. When it came back on, the time was wrong. 3:33 a.m. I looked at my wristwatch. It was only 1:40. The energy there felt off, like time was warped. That's when I heard it, a sound unlike anything else. A loud crack, followed by a deep moan. Something between a chant and suffocated pain. It came from the lower part between the ivy-covered mausoleums. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down. The tombs looked bigger that night, the path longer, and each step made the ground creak in an unnatural way, like I was stepping on dry bones. I reached the spot and saw it again. The creature. But this time, it was closer. Tall. Thin. All bone. Like someone had sculpted a man out of rotting wood. Its face had no eyes, just slits. And its chest? It was hollowed out, carved with that same symbol, etched into living flesh. It moved like it was both in pain and in ecstasy, arms shaking like branches in a storm. And then, it spoke, but not with sound, with presence, a full sentence inside my mind, like a guttural echo shoved down my throat. He is awake, and you saw him. I ran, didn't think. Fell, scraped my knee, dropped the flashlight, didn't even look back. I made it to the watch house, locked everything, and crawled under the desk, shaking like a kid with a fever. The night wouldn't end. Every minute felt like a century. The sounds didn't stop. Tears in the air, moans between the graves, and that damn name echoing in my head, Atzarel. Around 6 a.m., daylight still hadn't broken through. The sky was still dark, and my watch was stuck at 3:33. Nothing changed. It was like I'd gotten trapped in a hole in time. I stepped out of the guard shack. The wind had stopped, and the silence was absolute. I looked around and saw the candles, all of them lit, dozens of graves, all with the same carved symbol. On the highest hill behind the cemetery, there was something new. A stone structure, like an altar or a mausoleum base, covered in ropes, bones, and old fabric. And right in the center, a hole, a well. I had the distinct feeling something inside it was staring back at me, not with eyes, with intent. Then I saw something coming out of the well, not the same creature from before, something worse, a shadow, broader, denser, like a rip in the air. I didn't wait. I ran to my bike, started it, shifted gears, and sped down that hill like hell itself was chasing me. The sunlight only appeared when I hit the last curve of the road, like the day had been held back in there, like the cemetery had for a few hours, disconnected from the rest of the world. I got home feeling like I'd escaped death, but it was worse than that. It felt like I had brought it with me. I turned off my phone, shut all the windows, turned off the lights, and that's when I noticed my shirt still had dirt on it, damp soil, like something had grabbed me. I went straight to the shower, and there, as the water fell, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something that chilled me to the bone. On my left shoulder, there was a bruise. But it wasn't just any bruise. It was 4 thin marks, like claws. I didn't tell anyone that day. Who would believe me? Hey, Mom. So, I worked 3 nights at a cemetery, and now there's, a blind entity trying to swallow me through a pit. But the unease kept growing. I tried calling Edson again. This time he answered. His voice was different. Hello? Edson? It's me. The night guard. Dude, listen. Something really messed up happened. There was a symbol, some candles, and something crawled out of a grave. You saw him, didn't you? I froze. His voice was empty. No surprise. What do you mean, him? You'd better forget. Don't go back there. Don't even try to understand. Just forget. Then he hung up. Just like that. Like it was already too late. That's when I understood. This wasn't some anomaly. It was a ritual, a practice, an offering, and I was part of it. The following days, I tried to go back to normal, but things started to fall apart. Small things, but they piled up. My cat, Chico, vanished, gone without a trace. Doors locked, windows closed. All I found was a clump of fur in the kitchen and dirt marks in the sink. I started having nightmares. Always the same setting. The well. Sometimes I was falling into it. Other times I'd wake up already inside, looking up, and seeing the creature with the carved chest staring down at me. I lost my appetite. My skin turned pale, eyes sunken. My sister said I looked possessed. She laughed after, but the words stuck with me. I tried going to a priest, went to a parish up north, spoke with an old man named Joachim. He listened in silence. At the end, he handed me a small bottle of holy water and said, "If you weren't the one who called it, then someone close to you did." "Called what?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just closed the door and stayed quiet. I swore I'd never go back there. But a few days later, I got a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. It only said, "You saw. Now you have to close the cycle." Attached was a photo of me, sleeping, in my own bed. The symbol was scratched into the wall behind me. I panicked, swept the room, searched for cameras, called the police. Nothing. They said it was probably a prank, that they couldn't do anything without evidence of a break-in. The next night, I heard a noise in the hallway, got up with a knife in hand. It was coming from the bathroom. I went in, and the faucet was running. But it wasn't water. It was black dirt, thick, rotten smelling. I knew I had to go back, at least to try to understand, or break it somehow. I climbed the hill during the day, but the sky was overcast. The path seemed more eroded, like something heavy had walked over it many times. The cemetery gate was wide open. Not unlocked, not cracked, wide open. And inside, everything was the same. The candles were out, but the soot was still fresh. The symbol carved into at least 10 new tombstones, and the stone altar on the hilltop, bigger, like it had been fed. I approached the well. The smell was unbearable. Sulfur, rotting flesh, open graves, and deep down, an eye, just one, blinking, with a vertical pupil, like a reptile, but surrounded by human flesh. I don't remember exactly what happened next, just flashes, a red light, a sharp noise, and my own voice, saying things I didn't recognize, languages not from this world. I woke up hours later, on the asphalt, bike tipped over beside me, and the symbol now carved into my arm, with dried blood. I went to a hospital, told them I fell off the bike. They stitched me up and sent me home. Since then, I've lived on caffeine, bright lights, and eyes wide open. I don't sleep more than 2 hours, because every time I close my eyes, I see that well, and I hear that sentence. He woke up, and you saw. Time doesn't feel the same anymore. Mirrors reflect things that aren't behind me. Animals avoid me. And now, the symbol has appeared on my apartment door, like someone is marking me, sealing me. And if you think this is just a story, think twice before working in a place where the dead no longer want to sleep. I can't say if the worst part was what I saw, or what started happening afterward. Waking up in the middle of the night to hear footsteps in the hallway became routine. Except the footsteps weren't mine. They were outside my bedroom door, slow, stopping, then starting again, always closer to the door. I was trembling, clutching the knife I kept on my nightstand. I tried not to make a sound, but every breath felt like thunder in that heavy silence, and I was sure it wasn't human. One night, I heard a low voice whispering my name. Not a human voice, but something rough, jagged, like it tore through the air and stabbed into my mind like a blade. "You saw," it said, broken and almost inaudible. I got up to turn on the light, but the bulb started flickering frantically. It felt like the darkness itself wanted to swallow me. When the light came back, on the wall, was its shadow. That thing without eyes. Tall, slender, with unnaturally long arms. The shadow seemed to stretch toward the ceiling and shrink at the same time. My fingers went numb. The knife slipped from my hands. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed another knife, and swore I'd get out of there alive, no matter what it took. The next day, the phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered on impulse. "I know what you saw," said a calm female voice, filled with a kind of authority that made me swallow hard. "Who is this?" I asked, trying not to sound as scared as I was. "My name doesn't matter. Just know you're not alone in this." She explained that sometimes, old things wake up where you least expect. That the cemetery where I worked had been built over ancient indigenous land, a sacred place that had been desecrated for centuries. "The creature you saw is a guardian." Guardian? Yes. A being that protects what humans were never meant to disturb. She gave me instructions for a simple ritual. Told me not to do it alone, but I had no one to turn to. I looked for a medium. An old man named Dimas, who lived on the outskirts of town. He welcomed me into a room filled with incense and strange symbols with candles that didn't seem to burn, but radiated intense heat. "What have you brought with you?" he asked, eyes sunken. "I don't know. Something that shouldn't be awake." "Then you need protection." Demas performed an improvised ritual, chanting in forgotten tongues, using herbs and objects I'd never seen. That night, I dreamed the guardian spoke to me. It said I was in debt for disturbing the balance, but the choice was mine. Run and be, marked forever, or face it and try to close the cycle. I decided to return to the cemetery. I couldn't keep running from what I'd seen. Using what I learned from Demas, I prepared a kit. Candles, coarse salt, holy water, myrrh incense, and a silver knife he gave me. The tension was thick, like the very air was charged. The night was cold, the wind sharp, and clouds covered the moon, making everything darker. I didn't know if I was ready. Maybe I never would be. When I arrived at the cemetery, everything seemed normal, but there was a heavy energy in the air. The stone altar was lit, the candles burning on their own. The symbol glowed red, pulsing, almost breathing. I placed the salt in a circle, lit the candles, and began reciting the words Demas had taught me. The shadow appeared. Tall, menacing. It moved toward me, stretching its long arms, trying to breach my circle. The silver knife in my hand felt like the only line between who I was and what I could become. I shouted the final words. And the shadow recoiled, screaming a sound that was pain and rage at once. The symbol on the altar began to fade, and the creature dissolved into a black mist that rose and vanished into the sky. With the first light of dawn, the cemetery seemed to breathe in relief. I left that place exhausted, bruised, but alive. But the doubt lingered. What if I didn't destroy it? What if the creature was just the guardian of something far worse? I looked at my arm. The symbol was fading, but I knew it would never leave me completely, because there are things humans were never meant to awaken. I went back to the city, but the feeling of being watched never left. People around me started acting strange. Distant friends, neighbors who avoided eye contact, even my family seemed wary. My life became a cycle of exhaustion, fear, and isolation. I went to therapy, took medication, tried to rationalize everything as stress or guilt. but I knew it wasn't that. It was something inside me. One night, struggling to sleep, I woke up to a burning sensation on my arm. I looked, and the symbol was there, glowing a dull red. There was no doubt left. I wasn't just a night guard. I was part of something beyond human understanding. And that thing without eyes, the guardian of the cemetery, it might never leave. Because I saw it. If you're thinking about working nights in a place where the dead rest, be careful. Because not everything buried wants to stay that way. And sometimes, the only thing worse than seeing what you shouldn't is knowing you'll never forget.